Hi, everyone. Great to be here today, and if my voice will hold out for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the same topic of tokenizing carbon. A few years ago, I moved to Singapore and worked with a couple of guys to launch the Air Carbon Exchange, where we were tokenizing carbon as an asset class for trading. And that really led me to moving on to something that was a little more consumer-oriented, B2B2C. I wanted to start today with something that's hopefully really practically useful for everyone, because I get lots of questions about, like, what are carbon offsets, how do you tokenize them, what kind of data is important, what kind of data is going on chain. And so I wanted to just take a moment to share with you some of the details. There's a lot of stuff on the screen here, so I won't talk about all of it. But when you're thinking about carbon offsets as a part of your project, you want to be thinking a little bit about what kind of project is it? Is it a forestry project? There's methane capture projects that'll capture methane from landfills, different kinds of projects that have different social benefits. And another really important thing to be thinking about is how permanent is that offset? If you invest in a forest or you protect a forest, might it burn? If you put carbon, sequester it underground in an old oil well, will it stay there? And then one of the most important things that people talk about today as you look at your carbon offsets is it additional? Would this have happened if you hadn't invested and making a financial incentive for that activity to happen, for those trees to be planted, for that methane to be captured? And permanence and leakage are very similar. If I protect a forest, is someone going to cut down the forest next door instead? All of these things are important. And then you've got to think about the registries. There's a whole series of registries out there that have really specific details about how do you measure carbon. What's your carbon baseline? What's the carbon biomass measurement tools? You need to understand a little bit about that, and making sure that the carbon offsets that you're using are from a reasonable registry. All of those things matter. What's the measurement process? You'll hear about MRV. If you're using a real registry like Vera, there's a lot of information about that. And then where can you buy and sell them? So I think Air Carbon, the company that I used to be with, was the first company out there to tokenize carbon and make it available to trade as an asset class. But none of these registries will allow carbon to be retired at a quantity less than 1 ton. The smallest entry you can put into Vera or Gold Standard is 1 ton. So how do you go below that? A cup of coffee is 1 or 2 kilograms of carbon associated with the footprint of that cup of coffee. How can you fractionalize down? Of course, we all know that NFT collections are really perfect for fractionalizing ownership and all of that kind of stuff. So we'll get into that. And then there's a whole bunch of other traits. How old is your carbon offset? If you're working with one of these guys that was up here before, Hedera, Flow Carbon, et cetera, and you buy a tokenized carbon offset, what's the vintage? Was that carbon offset in 2014? Was it offset in 2009? That's one of the problems they came up with the Toucan protocol. They had a lot of really old carbon that was pulled on chain and sold, and it wasn't very high quality. And then probably the most important thing here is what's the difference between a retired carbon offset and an unretired carbon offset, and what does that have to do with all the registries? So carbon as an asset class can be traded. It's like gold, it's like corn. If you buy it, you can trade it on. But once it's used, once that corn is eaten, once that oil is burned, you can't trade it anymore. And the same is supposed to be true with carbon. Once you retire it, once you use it to offset some carbon footprint, your personal, your corporate footprint, it shouldn't be able to be traded on. And that is specifically one of the major concerns in the industry right now, which is why Vera and Gold Standard and pretty much all of the major registries have said you cannot tokenize carbon for trading. And the only thing that you can do is retire it directly. The reason is they want to be the canonical source of truth about why was a carbon offset retired so that they can make sure it's not double counted. Well, gosh, what a mouthful in one slide. But let me continue. So now the next question I would say is why Web3? Why are we trying to do carbon offsetting? There was a whole bunch of talk about, SQL databases. All the carbon offsets exist in SQL databases. Blockchain is not better than SQL databases for most things. For some things it is, and for carbon offsets it is, because when you think about the carbon supply chain, it's distributed across the entire planet. There's projects in Asia, in Africa, in South America, North America, in the Arctic, They're all over the place. And so are the buyers and sellers, and so are all the sources of data. Satellites, drones, people measuring trees, all of that kind of stuff. And we need to be able to do transactions with some random guy in Indonesia. So it's a trustless system, and it's already liquid. There's more than $250 billion worth of carbon offsets traded every year. So Web3 is a really great way to aggregate a whole bunch of data in a trustless environment and do transactions that have finances attached to them. Want to make sure I have enough time. And we believe everyone has to participate. Web3 is a great way to bring in more people, to do the branding and to do the community building. And if you're Starbucks, you probably want to have carbon offsets from the coffee growing district of Colombia, Brazil, and Indonesia. If you're IKEA, you want your carbon offsets from the northern boreal forests where the spotted owls are and where you get your wood pulp. What do we do? I've been tokenizing carbon for the last 3 years. I started Metacarbon last year, and our job is to work with suppliers. We have 20 forestry projects around the world that we work with. They put their carbon on our platform on consignment. Unlike what was said here, we can actually retire carbon and get it onto blockchain into a registry in less than 2 seconds. It's all automated. We have an integration directly into Vera through IHS Markets. And so we can do it in real time, and we can send you that PDF file, and the PDF file will point back to the registry entry, and you can get an NFT as well. But really, the interesting part is on the brands. How do we help brands engage their audience on the topic of climate change? And so brands and community bring you back to DAOs. We're working with a DAO creator now to set up our first DAO. It's focused on turtles and blue carbon. And so we'll be able to use the community building features of NFTs and DAOs to be able to direct the financing and also bring in more source of truth. So the woman in Cartagena, Colombia, who's planting mangrove seedlings in our mangrove restoration project there, and the man who runs the nursery, they're NFT holders, and they're part of the DAO. We're able to bring people in from the local community. That's what Web3 is about. A little bit of self-promotion. We have really one company, Metacarbon, 2 brands. Stand for Trees has been selling carbon at retail for the last 7 years. And Metacarbon also started Carbon Creatures, which is now a new Web3 project from the last year or so. We have a whole bunch of NFT collections. They're all carbon negative. There's full traceability and transparency back to the registry, so you can see when you buy your carbon offset, and we can do carbon offsets down to 1 kilogram. It's a pretty simple process. We put 1 ton of carbon into an NFT collection, and then do 1,000 NFTs, max supply in the NFT collection. Each NFT is worth 1 kilogram. Done. How do we get around Vera saying you can't tokenize carbon? Well, today the way we do it is we actually tokenize the receipt, because we're not allowed to tokenize the carbon itself as an asset class. So we tokenize the receipt, we give it to you in the form of an NFT. We have carbon calculators, you can embed them right into the NFTs. What's my carbon footprint? What size house do I live in? Am I a vegetarian? Where do I get my electricity? We have carbon footprint calculators for travel. I came to NFT.NYC, what medium of travel did I do? And then at the end of that process, it says, okay, 1.2 tons of carbon is associated with your trip. Would you like to buy a gorilla or a panda or some other endangered animal with 1.2 tons of carbon associated? We just launched a metaverse. It's not really our metaverse, it's Roomful. We just made our Web3 primitives available to them so that they can put us right into this underwater metaverse. And I think my time is running out, so I will say we're doing a free NFT drop tomorrow, sponsored by a public Australian company. All of the funds go to supporting forestry projects around Sydney that got burned down for the forest. So sign up, 120 free tokens tomorrow, koala tokens. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Everybody get that QR code.
There's the QR code.
Thank you so much.
Sure, Kyle.